You know, people frequently judge others by the persona they decide to present to the world. A reserved man, a reliable job as a mail carrier, no problems with neighbors, no conflict, an exemplary citizen, or so it seems. Today, I'm going to reveal what may lurk beneath a mask. That ordinary. Monday, November 18th, 2024. East Kilbride, a peaceful suburb beyond Glasgow. Around noon, an emergency call reaches dispatch. The voice sounds composed, no fear, no labored breathing, no indication of distress. The 27-year-old caller matter-of-factly says he suffered a psychotic episode triggered by prohibited substances and has just killed his girlfriend. He then gives his home address without hesitation and asks officers to arrive and take him into custody. Under 10 minutes later, responding officers reach a top-floor apartment. They're prepared for disorder, perhaps resistance. Instead, they discover the resident, Yuan Methan, sitting quietly in the living room. Then, in the hallway, partly concealed beneath a plain towel, is the body of 21-year-old Phoenix Spencer Horn. What the officers discover inside the apartment is so unsettling that it seems entirely detached from the picture of the ordinary young man standing in front of them. How could a person with an impeccable reputation commit something like this inside his own home? More importantly, why would investigators ultimately learn that the key to this crime could be concealed within digital records stretching back more than a decade? Let's carefully trace the timeline step by step. To understand how such a horrifying scene became possible, we have to look back at who these two people were before they ever crossed paths. Because in ordinary life, they presented sharply different identities to those around them. Phoenix Spencer Horn was the sort of person many families depend on for support, stability, and trust in their everyday lives. As the youngest among 4 siblings, she understood from childhood that achieving goals required genuine effort. At just 20, this young woman was already shouldering a tremendous workload. She held a position at a nearby hotel while also taking cafe shifts whenever available. What strikes me most is the way her employers spoke about her. They explained that Phoenix never merely finished work and headed home. Instead, she carried an upbeat spirit into every room she walked through. She possessed an unusual gift for soothing angry customers without displaying even the smallest sign of frustration. Conflict simply wasn't her style. She consistently searched for shared ground and workable answers. Here, we're seeing someone profoundly compassionate, with a definite picture of where she wanted her future to go. Now, let's focus on Yuan Methan. Beside Phoenix, he seemed almost entirely unchanged, but in a manner society generally considers comforting. A grown man employed by the Postal Service. He remained comfortably settled in his parents' house, avoided trouble with the law, and passed his days delivering letters. To the neighbors and colleagues around him, he was almost unnoticed, dependable, reserved, rule-abiding. Nobody considered him dangerous. He disappeared into the surroundings so effortlessly that most individuals hardly registered his presence whatsoever. Yet whenever I examine cases such as this, I return to one question. Why do we instinctively place our faith in people merely because they're quiet? When digital forensic specialists investigated the history of this apparently ordinary mail carrier, they discovered dated internet archives associated with him. Their findings revealed that from 2013 through 2015, Yuan had generated some profoundly troubling online activity. Under concealed usernames across different forums, he published lengthy conversations about fantasies centered on harming other individuals. He plainly voiced intense resentment toward women and maintained that violent conduct was a valid means of preserving control. Furthermore, he boasted about taking prohibited substances and claimed that he featured in obscure adult material. Pause and consider that contrast for a moment. Yuan never eliminated those more sinister impulses. Instead, he recognized that opinions of that kind would swiftly make him a social pariah. Therefore, he altered his approach. He discarded the profiles capable of revealing him and adopted the appearance of an average man. He hadn't conquered the rage he held within. He had merely learned to conceal it more effectively from those surrounding him. For years, he preserved the persona of a quiet, ordinary worker in the eyes of nearly everyone who knew him. Ultimately, that deliberately constructed image weakened the defenses of the woman who would eventually become the target of his behavior. In 2022, circumstances brought these two completely different individuals together at a family gathering. That occasion was when Yuan Methan first displayed his carefully developed talent for fitting in with Phoenix Spencer Horn and those closest to her. He was courteous, considerate, and reliable. His entire manner conveyed the impression of a caring and trustworthy boyfriend. Phoenix's mother, Allison, would later tell the court that the young man appeared to be an excellent match. Her family members were sincerely pleased. Their hard-working, compassionate daughter had someone beside her who seemed dependable, settled, and employed in an ordinary postal service career. Several months afterward, the couple chose to share a home. They leased a modest apartment on the uppermost floor of a residential building in the Glen Lee area, on the edge of town. Go back through their social media accounts from that time, and you'll see what seems like an entirely happy relationship. Images from trips together, snapshots from celebrations, grinning faces, public expressions of affection. Their digital lives appeared perfect. One post after another portrayed total peace, drawing hundreds of encouraging reactions and comments. Nobody within their social circle understood that behind the apartment's locked doors, circumstances were already starting to shift. Do you know what catches my attention in cases like these? The quiet way controlling partners build authority. The transformation from affectionate partner into controlling presence didn't occur through explosive fights or theatrical confrontations. Yuan proceeded cautiously, deliberately, one step at a time, slowly building an atmosphere of ongoing psychological strain. It began with minor criticism, nothing extraordinary by itself, yet it happened repeatedly. Little by little, he undermined Phoenix's self-confidence with cutting remarks about her looks, clothing choices, and physical state. Then another method appeared: emotional withdrawal. Whenever Phoenix did something that failed to fit what he expected, Yuan would completely cease talking to her. He might disregard her for several days. They would occupy the same apartment, living within the same space. Still, he behaved as if she weren't there whatsoever. It was an intentional signal, reminding her that attention, conversation, and even basic recognition remained under his control. For Phoenix, someone who had always believed disagreements could be settled through sincere discussion and direct communication, that emotional distance became exceptionally hard to handle. She kept trying to fix things and make the relationship work, hoping each time that the situation could somehow improve. She repeatedly looked inward for explanations, while telling herself that perhaps she could restore the peace they once seemed to share. She said sorry. She changed her conduct. She pushed herself increasingly hard to satisfy his expanding list of demands. After Yuan understood that he had acquired this silent authority over her, he went even further, gradually starting to dictate how she used her time and where she went during the day. Before long, nearly everything in her daily routine began irritating him and provoking his disapproval. Her lingering after a hotel shift, chats with cafe colleagues, even ordinary visits to the nail technician or hairstylist. Gradually, he started severing her from the social ties that had always belonged in her life. His aim was straightforward: to make himself the central figure and focal point of her world. Meanwhile, Phoenix kept telling herself that these periods of emotional distance were merely temporary difficulties rooted in his own insecurities. She believed that sufficient patience, encouragement, and affection would eventually enable him to overcome them. Roughly halfway into the relationship, that long-awaited and significant turning point finally came. Phoenix chose to escape the suffocating pattern of control and left the apartment. For someone whose boundaries had been steadily eroded over time, it was an entirely reasonable choice. She plainly told Yuan that she needed some distance and temporarily brought their shared living arrangement to an end for the time being. So, what happens when someone with an unhealthy desire for control faces that sort of separation? Rather than accept her choice, Yuan entered full pursuit mode. He would not leave her in peace. The texts kept coming. The phone calls were relentless and endless. He stood outside the hotel and cafe where Phoenix worked her shifts. He tried every available tactic he could think of. He begged her to return. He vowed to change. He promised everything would be different. Now, consider one crucial detail uncovered during the investigation. During this separation, Yuan began using cocaine and anabolic steroids heavily. That mixture can seriously affect judgment, emotional control, and the ability to restrain impulses. In many situations, it may fuel sudden aggressive outbursts and increasingly erratic behavior. In practical terms, this meant the darker urges he had concealed for years through anonymous internet accounts were becoming increasingly difficult to restrain. He was becoming more impulsive, increasingly volatile, and less predictable. Yet because of how Phoenix understood people, she saw those developments in a completely different light. Statements and court records from people closest to her indicate that she sincerely thought Yuan was unraveling because of the breakup itself. and she felt obligated to help him. She believed her support and presence might help him abandon harmful habits and put his life back in order. Fueled by that hope, Phoenix took the step that would eventually alter everything. She returned to the apartment in the Glen Lee neighborhood. It's striking how frequently people mistake a partner's difficulties for a genuine desire to change. Meanwhile, Phoenix concealed nearly all of this from her family. Her mother and relatives didn't realize how damaging conditions within the relationship had become. She didn't want to weigh them down with trouble at home or create needless anxiety. Instead, she spoke privately with only a handful of trusted friends. Those confidential talks became her sole release. Through personal messages, she sometimes confessed that Yuan's conduct was starting to frighten her, and that living inside their shared apartment was becoming increasingly hard. And Yuan wasn't merely continuing his stimulant use. By then, he had essentially transformed their home into a place of continual instability. The couple began living together again, but now each day came with an underlying sense of uncertainty, because his increasing dependence on those substances had removed much of the restraint that had previously helped him preserve the image of a calm, ordinary man. Saturday, November 16, 2024. Inside the top-floor apartment, the mounting tension had finally reached its limit. Just before noon, Yuan arrived home after work. Phoenix was away, working her shift at the coffee shop, leaving the apartment empty. By himself inside, he started sending her a string of text messages. His messages centered on complaints. He voiced annoyance over her work schedule and claimed he was being made to spend his day off alone. Investigators later recovered those exchanges from phone records. Phoenix replied that she would finish later and proposed getting takeout so the two could enjoy a peaceful evening together. Around 9 that evening, she arrived back home. The pair ordered delivery and settled down to eat. At 9:30 p.m., Phoenix sent her mother one final text. There was nothing strange about it. No suggestion anything was wrong, only a short update explaining that the day had ended and all was well. With that routine message, Phoenix's recorded digital activity stopped. What followed is where the sequence of events becomes profoundly disturbing. Sunday morning, November 17th, Phoenix's mother sent her a normal message, yet by then, Phoenix no longer had her phone. Yuan answered instead. He told Phoenix's mother that she was still sleeping and would respond later. Sometime afterward, he sent another text. On this occasion, he tried to copy Phoenix's style of writing. He said she had just awakened, apologized for replying late, and assured her mother that everything was fine. The aim behind those messages was straightforward: to gain time, postpone concern, and stop anyone from immediately searching for her. But those texts were not the sole disturbing element of what investigators uncovered. They also examined Yuan's activities while Phoenix remained inside the apartment. Digital forensic evidence showed that during Sunday he accessed adult content websites roughly 170 times. As events unfolded around him, he seemed occupied with viewing online material and carrying on his day as if nothing had occurred. There was no apparent urgency, no indication of panic. At one point, he grabbed Phoenix's vehicle keys, walked out of the apartment, got into the car, and drove off. Investigators determined that the reason for this journey was to acquire another supply of prohibited substances. Afterward, he came back to the apartment and continued his routine. Meanwhile, something significant was happening next door. A woman residing in a neighboring apartment noticed something strange. Around the kitchen, where the walls separating the two units met, an odd and unpleasant smell had begun to emerge. At the time, she paid little attention to it. She believed it might have been a ventilation problem. What she had detected were the earliest physical indications that something was seriously wrong inside the apartment upstairs. Yuan stayed inside, almost entirely cut off from the world outside. And while the hours went by, the carefully manufactured account he was giving, others drew steadily nearer to the moment reality would catch up with him. 2 days before Phoenix was eventually discovered, events had taken place behind those apartment walls during the early hours of Sunday morning. Investigators would eventually piece together what had occurred. They did not rely on Yuan's contradictory explanations, but instead followed physical evidence and accounts given by independent witnesses. Together, those pieces would ultimately provide a much clearer version of events than any story he tried to tell about himself, and would later prove crucial to understanding the full sequence of events that followed. The earliest major timestamp came from neighbors living below. A man residing directly beneath the apartment later told investigators that precisely at midnight on Saturday, November 16th, he heard a sudden, powerful impact from the flat above. Following that, he could distinctly hear heavy movement and strange activity overhead that went on for quite a while. As you might expect, that single loud thump became the sole audible indication, signaling the start of what was unfolding inside the apartment. The later forensic examination helped piece together the physical progression of events. It all started inside one room, where a confrontation took place between the couple. Based on the medical examiner's conclusions, Yuan first applied a powerful restraint that prevented Phoenix from breathing properly. She soon became unconscious and fell onto the floor. Investigators believe that impact was the sound the downstairs neighbor heard just after midnight. From then on, Phoenix could no longer defend herself. What followed became one of the central reasons investigators disputed Yuan's assertion that he had acted amid a chaotic, substance-induced psychotic episode. Court documents indicate that 3 different kitchen knives were used during the attack. Investigators established that Yuan retrieved them separately, one after another. And that creates an obvious question. If a person is genuinely overwhelmed by total panic and confusion, why would they repeatedly change from one weapon to another? Forensic specialists recorded 20 sharp force injuries in total. Many were clustered around the face, while additional wounds appeared across the upper torso. Medical examiners eventually determined that the chest injuries caused her death. Yet the last stage of the timeline was even more disturbing for investigators. Once Yuan realized Phoenix was dead, he carried her into the bathroom. Evidence indicated that he then tried to modify and hide what had happened, so evidence could be removed from the scene. Prosecutors said he planned to put the remains inside bags and take them out of the apartment, but carrying out that plan became considerably harder than he had expected. In the end, he gave up on it. Investigators discovered that he exited the bathroom, carried Phoenix into the hallway beside the front entrance, covered her using a towel, and left her there until police arrived. That doesn't resemble a moment of uncontrolled confusion. It appears much more like a deliberate scheme that eventually went wrong. Monday, November 18, 2024 became the day concern finally extended outside the apartment's walls. Employees at the hotel where Phoenix was expected to start her morning shift were the first to realize something wasn't right. She had a reputation for reliability and would always tell coworkers if she expected to be late. When she failed to arrive, management immediately attempted to reach her. Nobody answered the calls. Initially, her coworkers believed she might simply be unwell. What they didn't realize was that at precisely that time, her partner was already talking to an emergency services dispatcher. Following his arrest, Yuan was detained as investigators started recording and examining evidence, and that marked the beginning of another stage in the case. His lawyers sought to establish a defense based on diminished responsibility. The attorneys claimed that he had suffered an acute psychotic episode brought on by a potent mixture of prohibited substances. Under that argument, he had become entirely detached from reality and unable to comprehend what he was doing. So here's the issue. Investigators, prosecutors, and eventually the court had to determine, was this genuinely a total breakdown of control, or was it a deliberate effort to lessen responsibility for what had occurred? That entire defense theory collapsed after prosecutors introduced a minute-by-minute reconstruction of Yuan's conduct across the weekend. Investigators put forward a simple argument. A person undergoing a completely uncontrolled psychotic episode would not have been able to preserve the appearance of ordinary life for nearly a day and a half. The degree of organization reflected in his behavior painted an entirely different picture. From constructing a fabricated alibi to deliberately controlling his everyday activities, each action pointed toward preparation, awareness, and conscious choices. Such conduct required a mind that remained clear and concentrated. Prosecutors maintained that his behavior following the killing showed deliberate and rational thought, offering little evidence for the claim that he had briefly become detached from reality. As those courtroom arguments continued, Phoenix's relatives were enduring an ordeal of their own. With court proceedings extending over many months, family members were repeatedly compelled to revisit disturbing forensic evidence and investigative findings. In public remarks, relatives acknowledged being consumed by guilt. Again and again, they wrestled with the same agonizing questions. How had they failed to see the warning signs? Why hadn't they identified the unhealthy relationship patterns that now appeared unmistakable in hindsight? And why hadn't they treated those fears more seriously while there was still an opportunity? The decisive moment before trial arrived on June 17, 2025 at the High Court in Glasgow. By then, physical evidence, digital records, and witness accounts had built an overwhelming case. Recognizing that there was little opportunity remaining to dispute the facts, Yuan changed direction. He officially pleaded guilty to the intentional crime that ended Phoenix's life. Consequently, a complete jury trial was no longer required. Yet one crucial question remained unresolved. What sentence would the court hand down to someone whose actions had forever destroyed Phoenix's future and everything she had dreamed of achieving? Sentencing was held on July 14, 2025, inside Glasgow's High Court. Before Lord Matthews withdrew from the courtroom to reach his decision, Yuan's defense submitted a written statement on his behalf. Within that statement, he said he could not comprehend why he had carried out what he did. His lawyers portrayed those words as proof of remorse and as backing for their claim that he had suffered an abrupt mental collapse. They hoped the court might lower the minimum punishment. But that leaves a serious question. Can such a statement genuinely be regarded as remorse when the evidence is already conclusive and the person delivering it is confronting the possibility of the most severe punishment available? Lord Matthews read parts of the statement aloud in court. His reaction was firm and unmistakable. He stated that the letter explained nothing. It supplied no real answers and gave Phoenix's family no comfort whatsoever. The court also pointed out that expert assessments uncovered no indication Yuan had been unable to control his behavior during the attack. If anything, many of his choices afterward suggested the exact opposite. His efforts to pose as Phoenix in text conversations and preserve a fabricated account showed that his ability to reason was still functioning. Lord Matthews gave particular weight to what occurred after Phoenix died. The judge said Yuan had stolen much more than her future. In the court's view, what he did afterward stripped away fundamental human dignity and inflicted further pain on those who cared for her. His attempts to manipulate, hide, and remove evidence created enduring emotional harm for the family and denied them the chance to say goodbye in the manner they had wanted. The judge emphasized that behavior of this kind is regarded with the highest seriousness under Scottish law and ranks among the strongest aggravating factors a court may consider when determining a sentence. The court ultimately imposed life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years. Under that punishment, Yuan cannot apply for parole until 2047. Neither the prosecution nor Phoenix's relatives decided to contest the ruling. Under Scottish sentencing guidelines, a minimum period of that duration is viewed as substantial for a case of this kind. Still, those nearest to Phoenix made clear that no amount of time in prison could ever return her to them. The verdict also triggered a wider discussion throughout Scotland. People began raising difficult questions. Can someone who managed to hide dangerous tendencies for years ever truly be regarded as safe to return to society? The case compelled many people to face an uncomfortable truth. Yuan's story showed that someone may seem entirely ordinary while concealing darker urges beneath the surface for an extremely long time. If a person can preserve that appearance for years, what guarantee is there that the same behavior won't happen again after release? Those questions remain under debate today. In East Kilbride, a simple memorial now stands as a reminder of Phoenix's life. Just across from the hotel where she once worked shifts, a wooden memorial bench has been placed. A small plaque displaying her name is attached to it. Friends, family members, and people from the community continue visiting the spot to remember her. And ultimately, that's what lies at the center of this entire case. Not the courtroom proceedings, not the headlines, not the legal disputes, but the memory of a young woman whose future was taken from her much too soon. For many within the community, Phoenix's story became a reminder that appearances don't always expose what is happening underneath, and that sometimes those who appear most ordinary are the people we know the least about. Conyers, Georgia, January 13, 2010. A peaceful subdivision erupts with the frantic screams of two 16-year-old girls. They had just come home from high school and discovered a horrifying scene of unimaginable bloodshed. Their mother, 34-year-old Nikki Whitehead, was lying dead in a pool of blood across the master bathroom floor. The savage nature of the ambush pointed toward a deeply personal act of rage. Investigators quickly started hunting for a disturbed intruder. They failed to recognize that the real planners behind this killing were the two sobbing identical twins standing directly before them. Before yellow police tape surrounded the residence, Nikki Whitehead was merely a woman pursuing the American dream. Born in 1975, she entered adulthood far too soon after giving birth to identical twin daughters, Jasmia and Tasmia, at only 18 years old. Life as a single teenage mother, raising two infants, presented a tremendous challenge. Still, Nikki would not allow her circumstances to determine her future. She had a natural drive and a keen sense of aesthetics, traits that drew her instinctively toward the beauty industry. Nikki established a respected career as a cosmetologist and salon worker around Atlanta. The setting matched her lively, social personality perfectly. Amid the steady whir of blow dryers and the pungent chemical smell of acrylic nails and hairspray, she transformed her customers while rebuilding her own life at the same time. Her goal remained clear and steadfast: give her daughters the quality of life she had always worked tirelessly to achieve. By her early 30s, that tireless work ethic had at last turned into real, visible success. She obtained a beautiful, spacious home in Conyers' Bridal Ridge subdivision, a peaceful, affluent suburban community roughly 24 miles east of downtown Atlanta. With manicured lawns and large two-story homes, it represented precisely the kind of neighborhood associated with security and upward mobility. During their younger years, the trio remained completely inseparable. Nikki, Jasmia, and Tasmia functioned as a close-knit, fiercely devoted family. Their bond seemed especially strong, and few people around them ever imagined anything could threaten it. The girls embodied their mother's commitment. As children, the twins were often dressed in matching clothes, their hair carefully styled, becoming a living testament to Nikki's professional talent and maternal pride. Friends and relatives frequently observed that mother and daughters behaved more like close sisters, exchanging clothes, music, and a contagious, energetic bond that brightened every room they entered. The sisters themselves possessed exceptional talent. Jasmia and Tasmia, lovingly called Jazz and Taz, were more than twins who looked exactly alike. They reflected one another's sharp intelligence and determination. During middle school, they remained regular honor roll students, easily maintaining straight A's, while taking part extensively in extracurricular pursuits, including Girl Scouts, choir, and competitive dance. They were courteous, articulate, and strongly connected to their surrounding community. From an outsider's perspective, the Whitehead home represented a remarkable success story of single motherhood. Yet moving from a humble upbringing into comfortable middle-class suburbia brought powerful, hidden pressures. Nikki was an exceptionally strict and demanding parent, increasingly difficult to manage within the increasingly tense household. As tensions continued to rise between them, she truly believed that exercising firm, unwavering authority was the sole dependable method of shielding her daughters from the hardships she had endured. She imposed strict rules about curfew, the particular kinds of clothing they could wear, and the companions they were allowed to have. For years, the girls honored that demanding framework. Under her intense supervision, they flourished, repeatedly achieving the outstanding academic performance Nikki expected. But when the twins neared their middle teenage years, the secluded, sheltered world the three had created started coming apart. Although their physical appearances remained identical, Jazz and Taz quickly formed separate, unmistakable personalities. They began urgently demanding independence. Matching outfits disappeared as personal fashion choices took over, while the previously peaceful household gradually succumbed to the unavoidable conflict of teenage defiance. Nikki's dating life brought another complicated factor. She had entered a serious relationship with a truck driver named Robert Head. Robert offered real emotional and financial security, and he genuinely cared about the girls. However, his presence inside the 500-square-foot home altered the fragile equilibrium between the three. Used to receiving their mother's complete attention and maintaining a relatively equal power arrangement with her, the twins now faced the expectations of a conventional two-parent family hierarchy. What started with ordinary teenage resistance, eye rolls, broken curfews, and bedroom doors being slammed, quickly transformed into something far more serious. The firm limits Nikki had created from love and concern for her daughters were now viewed by the 16-year-olds as a crushing, unbearable prison. In Conyers, the bright, affectionate household was silently becoming the backdrop for a catastrophic psychological battle. Adolescence brought an extremely unstable force into the Bridal Ridge home. Jazz and Taz, formerly straight-A pupils and their mother's greatest pride, started intentionally damaging their school records and their place within the household. They missed classes, falsified report cards to conceal failing marks, and deliberately displayed their defiance. Nikki reacted in the only manner she understood, tightening her control. She seized their phones, confined them at home for weeks, and put their favorite clothing away. Yet those conventional punishments which could have succeeded with one child proved completely ineffective against identical sisters. The twins presented a united front. They acted as a psychological sounding board. Whenever one believed she had been wronged, the other instantly intensified the complaint, creating an unbreakable, collective barrier of resistance against their mother. Robert Head's arrival in their everyday life only hastened the breakdown. To the girls, Nikki's boyfriend was an unauthorized authority figure trespassing on their territory. They openly ridiculed his efforts to settle arguments, leaving no doubt that they regarded the 2,500 square foot house as belonging exclusively to them and their mother. Disagreements quickly shifted from ordinary shouting matches into frightening physical clashes. Neighbors, once impressed by the property's immaculate appearance, now regularly noticed patrol cars sitting in the driveway. Nikki started contacting the local sheriff's department to preserve basic order, turning police intervention into an improvised parenting tactic. The twins, clever and deliberate, soon discovered how to turn that system against her. The crisis reached its peak during the summer of 2008. An argument about chores and curfew erupted into a violent fight in the living room. Physically outmatched by two athletic, developing teenagers, Nikki struggled desperately to protect herself. Once officers arrived, the girls instantly changed their behavior. They convincingly portrayed themselves as victims, displaying minor scratch marks and alleging that their mother had attacked them without provocation. Officers observed that the 16-year-olds remained disturbingly composed, whereas Nikki appeared frantic and hysterical. Because of the injuries, Nikki was arrested and temporarily charged with domestic battery. It was a crushing humiliation for a woman who had given up her youth to create a life for her children. Though prosecutors eventually dropped the charges, the emotional damage was total. The mother-daughter relationship was completely broken, replaced with icy, deliberate hostility. After the arrest, juvenile court officials stepped in, concluding that the home environment was too poisonous for the teenagers. Temporary custody went to the girls' great-grandmother, Della Frazier, who lived several miles away. For Jasmia and Tasmia, the development felt like an enormous, intoxicating triumph. Della's house provided a considerably more permissive setting. Strict curfews disappeared, rigid restrictions faded, and the twins experienced the complete freedom they had been fiercely fighting to obtain. They enrolled at another high school, socialized with older groups, and removed Nikki from their everyday existence. But Nikki would not allow her daughters to destroy their futures. She sincerely believed Della's permissiveness offered a straight road toward delinquency and ruin. For the following 18 months, she waged a grueling legal fight to reclaim custody. She attended required counseling, finished anger management and parenting courses, and changed her work schedule to satisfy every court demand. She was resolved to have her girls living beneath her roof again, convinced that her strict affection was the sole barrier separating them from complete failure. Meanwhile, the twins fought determinedly against coming home. They directly told court-appointed counselors that they hated their mother, making clear they would do anything necessary to remain away from her. The psychologist recognized the girls' deep-rooted anger, yet badly underestimated its lethal potential, writing it off as extreme teenage angst. The legal system, placing family reunification above everything else, disregarded the twins' warnings. On January 5, 2010, a juvenile court judge delivered a fatal decision, ruling that Nikki had satisfied every state requirement and demonstrated she was a capable parent. The ruling carried consequences for everyone involved, and the twins understood exactly what it meant. Their anger was no longer hidden behind ordinary teenage complaints, and their resistance had become increasingly deliberate, focused, and dangerous. The court formally ended Della Frazier's temporary custody. Jasmia and Tasmia were instructed to gather their belongings and return to the Conyers subdivision at once. The girls were utterly crushed. In the courtroom, they sat with folded arms, glaring daggers at their mother, and seeing the court order as a death sentence for their social lives. When the twins returned to the two-story home that afternoon, the atmosphere became suffocating immediately. Nikki had won the legal battle, yet her enemy now lived within her own walls. The girls refused entirely to speak with her. They expressed themselves through frozen stares and forcefully shut doors, treating their mother like an adversarial warden. Nikki, trying to reclaim control, promptly introduced another strict set of rules. insisting on flawless school attendance and an end to their defiant conduct. She established an unmistakable boundary, unaware that her daughters had already resolved to violate it. For 8 days, the house became eerily silent. The countdown toward January 13th was officially underway. On Wednesday morning, January 13th, 2010, the sun still had not risen above Conyers, casting the Bridal Ridge subdivision beneath a cold pre-dawn gray. Outdoors, temperatures hovered around a bitter 32 degrees F, turning dew on the manicured lawns to ice. Within the 2,500 square feet home, the atmosphere was colder still. 8 days of enforced cohabitation had created a suffocating psychological pressure cooker. Nikki Whitehead was awake, dressed, and already moving around the house. A demanding schedule awaited her, including errands and a hair appointment. The twins, Jasmia and Tasmia, were supposed to be getting ready for another day at Rockdale County High School. Instead, they stayed barricaded inside their bedrooms, ignoring their alarms and deliberately mounting a silent protest against their mother's restored authority. Nikki would not tolerate the defiance. She strode along the carpeted hallway, knocking firmly on their doors and ordering them to get up and dress. What came back was a weighty, rebellious silence. When the 16-year-olds eventually emerged, there was none of the usual teenage sleepiness, no dragging footsteps. They were completely alert. Their movements carried a stiff, coordinated hostility. Their identical faces wore matching looks of profound contempt. They ignored their mother altogether and entered the kitchen. That sprawling kitchen, marked by polished granite countertops, light oak cabinetry, and light-colored linoleum flooring, was about to change from the home's center into a slaughterhouse. Nikki followed them inside, unwilling to retreat. Near the center island, she demanded basic respect while spelling out the harsh consequences of their continued rebellion. She plainly warned that she would not hesitate to call juvenile authorities again. If they refused her rules, she threatened to have law enforcement remove them from the house and classify them as legally uncontrollable. For Jasmia and Tasmia, that was the final trigger. Being returned to the court system's strict confines or facing juvenile detention meant losing forever the freedom they had experienced at their great-grandmother's home. They did not yell. They did not launch into an ordinary adolescent tantrum. Instead, they created a firm physical barrier before the lower cabinets. They verbally tore into their mother, ridiculing her authority. Their voices overlapped, each intensifying the other until they became one seemingly impenetrable wall of defiance. The argument quickly crossed into openly hostile territory. The twins began carefully repositioning themselves. Using their identical athletic builds, they cornered their mother and blocked her escape routes toward the carpeted living room. Nikki noticed the tactical change. Ordinary maternal frustration vanished instantly, replaced by a sudden chilling surge of genuine terror. She was a 34-year-old woman weighing only 130 pounds. She found herself completely trapped by two younger, stronger opponents. She grabbed the phone, planning to call emergency services and stop the escalating nightmare. The attack began without even one warning cry. A heavy ceramic pot sitting on the granite counter became a weapon. One sudden, violent swing, a crushing blow struck Nikki's skull. The hollow, nauseating crack of bone, broken ceramic burst outward. Fragments scattered across the linoleum, sliding beneath the refrigerator. Nikki stumbled backward, her vision splintered. She lost her balance. For a moment, she could barely remain upright under the sudden assault. The twins rushed her. No hesitation, no mercy. They drove their mother onto the hard floor. The assault was incredibly fast, savage, relentless. Powerful blows hammered Nikki's face. Savage kicks struck her ribs. The 130 lb woman resisted with the raw, primal adrenaline of survival. She clawed desperately at their faces. She drove her teeth into exposed forearms, ripping through skin. She tore at their hair, frantically trying to gain an inch of breathing space. She was battling the very body she had carried and given birth to. The odds of the ambush were impossible to defeat. Two determined attackers against one stunned, bleeding victim. They restrained her flailing arms. They muffled her desperate screams for assistance. A hand moved toward the wooden knife block beside the sink, the sharp metallic scrape of steel sliding from its slot. The violence changed instantly from a savage beating into a deliberate execution. The blade came down over and over, the nauseating sound of metal ripping through fabric and flesh. Stabs across the chest, deep, ragged cuts across the neck. The sheer number of attacks, dozens of separate stab wounds, pointed to a total psychological break, a reservoir of hatred bursting. Blood sprayed in broad arcs across the spotless white lower cabinets. It gathered thick and dark, filling the grout lines across the floor. The powerful metallic odor of copper saturated the air completely, choking the room. Nikki slid through her own blood, choking, gasping for breath. Yet the fight continued beyond the kitchen. Bleeding heavily, Nikki managed to pull her battered body toward the hallway. She crawled forward on hands and knees. She left thick, smeared handprints across the white baseboards, fighting for every inch of ground. The twins pursued at a walking pace. They bent down and seized her ankles. They pulled her backward. A broad, horrifying streak of crimson covered the beige carpet, soaking deeply into its fibers. They dragged her limp body through the hallway, the friction scorching against the floor. They pulled her across the threshold and into the master bathroom. The cold tile provided no refuge. The twins towered over her, breathing heavily, watching with icy detachment as their mother drew her final, ragged, agonizing breaths. Her chest rose one final time. Then it stopped moving. The bathroom fell completely silent. The uneven, heavy panting of the 16-year-olds rang sharply against the vanity mirrors. They stared down at the mutilated body across the tiles. There was no instant recognition of horror. There was no frantic sobbing. There was no desperate call for an ambulance. Instead, Jasmia and Tasmia immediately began a chilling, synchronized cleanup routine. They walked back along the hallway, their shoes leaving tacky crimson footprints across the carpet. They went back into the kitchen. The room resembled an active battlefield. They collected heavy-duty cleaning products from beneath the sink. The harsh, caustic chemical sting of bleach quickly drowned out the strong, metallic odor of death. They poured the liquid straight across the linoleum. They used kitchen towels to aggressively scrub the largest pools of blood. But the attempt proved completely futile. The blood had already penetrated the porous surfaces. It had permanently soaked into the carpet padding along the hallway. The enormous amount of blood made sanitizing impossible. Understanding they could not remove the crime scene, they shifted towards self-preservation. They removed their blood-covered pajamas. They packed the ruined clothing, broken ceramic fragments, murder weapons, and soaked towels into thick plastic garbage bags. They entered the showers. As the water flowed pink, then deep red, they watched it spiral into the drain while washing their mother's DNA from their skin and hair. They scrubbed the dried blood flakes from beneath their fingernails. Side by side, they stood before the misted mirrors. They spread heavy coats of foundation and concealer across their faces, carefully concealing the painful scratches and bite bruises Nikki had left across their cheeks, necks, and arms during her desperate last defense. They straightened their hair with flat irons. From their closets, they chose stylish, spotless clothing. They doused themselves in strong perfume to cover any remaining trace of bleach or the coppery odor of blood. By then, the morning sun had fully risen, sending brilliant rays through the windows of the quiet home. The school day's schedule was demanding that they show up. They required a completely airtight alibi. The twins seized their backpacks, weighed down with textbooks and unfinished assignments. They exited through the front door and entered the bitter January cold. Behind them, they closed the door and secured the heavy deadbolt. The house had been sealed like a suburban tomb, hiding their mother's butchered remains on the bathroom floor. Jasmia and Tasmia proceeded along the neatly maintained sidewalk of the Bridal Ridge subdivision. They climbed aboard the yellow school bus with the other neighborhood children. They traveled the 20 miles to Rockdale County High School. Through the packed, noisy corridors, they moved effortlessly within the enormous flow of teenagers. They settled into their assigned seats. They wrote notes during lessons. They had lunch inside the cafeteria. They casually talked with classmates about weekend plans and popular culture. For 8 uninterrupted hours, the 16-year-olds carried out a flawless, disturbing imitation of ordinary daily life. A carefully constructed alibi, operating exactly according to schedule, as the ultimate nightmare remained hidden and silent at home. At 3:15 p.m., the large yellow Rockdale County school bus rolled back into the Bridal Ridge subdivision, shattering the afternoon quiet. Its air brakes released a loud hiss, the folding doors opened, and Jasmia and Tasmia stepped onto the sharp 40-degree Fahrenheit air. They covered the final few hundred feet to their home, their loaded backpacks hanging from their shoulders, to neighbors peering through their front windows. Everything appeared to be an entirely ordinary suburban scene. The twins talked casually, their immaculate clothes entirely clean, their hair carefully flat ironed. They crossed the broad concrete driveway, collected their keys, and opened the heavy front door. The act started the instant the deadbolt snapped into place. They had no need to inspect the sprawling 2,500 square foot house to understand what was waiting within. The sensory assault struck instantly and overwhelmingly. The suffocating air trapped inside the residence was thick with the harsh, burning fumes of industrial bleach, layered nauseatingly over the dense, heavy copper odor of clotted blood. The 16-year-olds dropped their backpacks across the tiled entryway. They remained inside just long enough to create a believable timeline for their discovery story, then rushed through the front door, leaving it wide open against the freezing January wind. They dashed across the manicured lawn, arms waving wildly, their cries ripping through the otherwise peaceful neighborhood. By chance, a Rockdale County Sheriff's deputy was patrolling the subdivision, his cruiser moving slowly down the street during a routine sweep. The twins raced straight toward the large 2-ton vehicle, desperately waving and gesturing toward their home's open doorway. They essentially made the deputy slam his brakes, with the tires sliding slightly over the frozen asphalt. The girls crumpled onto the street, gasping rapidly, pulling at their spotless clothing, and screaming incoherently that something horrible had happened to their mother. The deputy immediately shifted into tactical mode. He radioed dispatch for backup, pulled his standard issue sidearm, and cautiously advanced toward the open residence. The teenagers stayed on the front lawn, putting on a synchronized, convincing performance of hysterical, overwhelming grief. The officer crossed inside. What he encountered was utterly surreal. The house was eerily silent, yet the visible destruction suggested complete disorder. The deputy's attention immediately focused on the kitchen. Dark crimson streaks stained the polished granite countertops. The pale linoleum floor was entirely coated with a gruesome, slippery mixture of heavy blood and bubbling bleach. Broken fragments from a heavy ceramic pot littered the floor alongside overturned chairs and thoroughly destroyed kitchen towels. The enormous amount of blood pointed toward a frantic, extended struggle. The attack had obviously spread beyond the kitchen itself. The deputy tracked the horrifying trail farther through the house. Broad, dark drag streaks formed a dreadful route along the hallway, penetrating deep into the beige carpet fibers. Bloody, smeared handprints scarred the white baseboards, a desperate visual account of a woman struggling to survive while being pulled across the floor by a stronger force. The officer proceeded cautiously, weapon lifted, inspecting the hallway corners for any remaining danger. The trail suddenly stopped at the master bathroom entrance. He reached the doorway and stared down at the cold tile. Nikki Whitehead was lying still inside a vast pool of blood. The magnitude of the injuries was horrifying. Dozens of deep punctures and uneven lacerations covered her torso and neck. Her face was badly battered, while her ribs appeared crushed by powerful blows. Severe defensive injuries across her hands and arms showed that she had resisted her attackers with everything available to her until her final breath. The deputy swiftly searched for a pulse, but the 34-year-old woman was completely cold. Blood gathered within the grout lines had already started separating and drying. There was nothing paramedics could possibly do. The officer immediately withdrew from the bathroom, taking care not to disturb the bloody drag trail, and established the interior perimeter. He radioed dispatch, reporting a vicious homicide and immediately requesting crime scene technicians and lead detectives. Outside, events were quickly turning into a neighborhood spectacle. The twins' piercing screams had attracted nearly everyone in the Bridal Ridge community. Neighbors emerged onto their porches, tightening jackets against the cold, their faces drained with disbelief. Speculation erupted immediately and spread rapidly. A home invasion, a deliberate killing, a disturbed burglar prowling the affluent streets of Conyers. The neighborhood reaction was instant and horrifying. If a hard-working mother could be slaughtered in broad daylight inside her locked, fully secured home, no one in the subdivision was truly safe. More patrol vehicles flooded the peaceful street, their sirens slicing through the winter air. Their red and blue lights flashed harshly across the brick fronts of nearby homes. Paramedics arrived and immediately hurried toward the 16-year-olds. Jasmia and Tasmia were covered with thick thermal blankets, trembling violently, tears continuously running down their carefully made-up faces. They clung tightly to one another, crying uncontrollably against each other's shoulders. Their portrayal of trauma remained completely convincing. When the lead homicide detectives reached the scene, their first reaction was pure sympathy. They saw two beautiful, honor roll students crying on the lawn and perceived nothing except devastating tragedy. Investigators carefully escorted the girls toward the rear of a waiting ambulance to keep them warm. The detectives addressed them with gentle, reassuring voices, assuring the grieving daughters that they would keep searching until they caught the monster who had murdered their mother, utterly unaware that they were consoling the very people responsible for the slaughter. The homicide team immediately focused on the most statistically likely suspect in a domestic killing, the romantic partner. The enormous number of stab wounds and the intimate, close-range nature of the attack strongly pointed toward a deeply personal crime of passion, rather than an ordinary burglary that had turned violent. Detectives took Robert Head into the sterile interrogation room under harsh fluorescent lighting. The truck driver endured hours of exhausting, systematic questioning. Investigators pushed him relentlessly about his relationship history, recent arguments at home, and his exact location on that freezing Wednesday morning. He was told that his presence inside the residence had been a recognized source of conflict, yet the boyfriend's alibi was completely airtight. Commercial trucking records, satellite GPS information from his truck, and several independent witness accounts firmly placed him behind the wheel, hundreds of miles away on an interstate when the fatal attack occurred. He was fully eliminated as a suspect. With the leading person of interest cleared, investigators shifted their attention toward neighborhood speculation. The wealthy subdivision quickly descended into fear. Residents overwhelmed the tip lines, reporting unfamiliar vehicles and requesting additional patrols, frightened that a violent home invasion crew was targeting suburban homes. Yet, the physical evidence from the crime scene repeatedly undermined the burglary theory. Crime scene technicians observed that the front door's heavy deadbolt had been locked from inside. There were no broken windows, no damaged hinges, and no muddy shoe prints coming in from the backyard. The victim's purse, credit cards, and costly jewelry were still untouched on the bedroom dresser. The killers had not entered to rob anyone. They had entered with one purpose: to butcher. The investigation changed direction during an ordinary follow-up interview. Detectives needed to establish the timeline with the only two surviving occupants. While seated across from the teenagers inside the precinct, an experienced investigator spotted an obvious visual inconsistency. The girls had applied an unusually thick layer of liquid foundation and heavy concealer. It covered more than their faces, extending across their necks, forearms, and the backs of their hands. Such extensive cosmetic use was completely unlike normal teenage makeup habits. It resembled thick theatrical camouflage. The investigator courteously, yet decisively, asked the girls to clean their arms using a wet cloth. Their invented story about a mysterious intruder started collapsing the instant the cosmetics came away. Underneath the heavy makeup were serious, exposed lacerations. Deep, matching scratch marks ran violently along their cheeks and necks. Uneven, dark violet bruises, clearly formed in the pattern of human teeth, stained their forearms. When officers demanded an explanation for the fresh wounds, the sisters produced an awkward, poorly coordinated story. They claimed they had gotten into a minor, pointless physical confrontation with a rival student at school several days earlier. Detectives immediately understood that an ordinary high school scuffle could not leave frantic defensive bite injuries. The teenagers were promptly separated and taken into separate windowless questioning rooms. Without their psychological echo chamber or their ability to coordinate responses, the identical sisters had to endure the intense police interrogation completely on their own. Investigators relied on familiar high-pressure questioning methods. They methodically tore apart the school fight explanation, pointing out that the campus resource officer had documented no such confrontation. They tried turning the sisters against one another, subtly implying that one twin had already begun exchanging a complete confession for a reduced juvenile sentence. Officers soon noticed a disturbing behavioral transformation. The frantic, breathless sobbing the girls had performed so convincingly on the front lawn disappeared entirely. In its place emerged a cold, unyielding barrier of deliberate defiance. They remained stiff in their metal chairs. They repeatedly insisted they had entered at 3:15 p.m. and found the horrifying scene afterward. They maintained they knew absolutely nothing about how their mother had died, brushing aside the serious wounds on their own bodies as having nothing whatsoever to do with the murder. Without conclusive forensic evidence necessary to prosecute two minors for first-degree murder, authorities were forced to release them. Still, detectives did not simply send them home. Investigators obtained extensive search warrants covering the daughters themselves. Forensic specialists carefully collected swabs from the bruised bite wounds on their arms, searching for traces of saliva. They gathered tissue from underneath their manicured fingernails. They seized the fashionable, spotless clothes and shoes they had worn to school that day. The case then moved into the most painful and frustrating stage a homicide investigator can face: the quiet bureaucratic wait for the state crime laboratory. Because of severe administrative backlogs, the testing took months to complete. Throughout that agonizing period, the twins returned to their great-grandmother's home. They went to school, completed exams, attended spring social gatherings, and essentially remained free, carrying on an ordinary teenage life while the community stayed frozen by fear of an unknown killer. Detectives kept close watch, quietly constructing an unavoidable trap. In late May, the state crime laboratory finally returned its complete forensic findings. The biological evidence was conclusive and devastating. The DNA profile recovered from the deep, torn wound was an exact, unquestionable match to her daughter's. Tiny saliva traces collected from the bruised bite marks on the teenager's forearms matched the victim's dental records perfectly. Additionally, forensic examination of the home's bathroom plumbing uncovered substantial, concentrated amounts of the victim's blood inside the P-traps beneath the shower drains, establishing beyond doubt that the killers had bathed there to remove evidence. The final devastating strike against their story came through the girls' seized shoes. Technicians identified microscopic, high-velocity blood droplets across the soles and laces of the footwear they had worn to school. The spatter could only have been produced by someone positioned directly above a human body during a violent arterial attack. Their carefully fabricated account of discovering the scene that afternoon was utterly destroyed. Science had definitively rewritten the timeline. The evidence established that the deadly ambush happened during the early morning, well before the yellow school bus ever showed up. The Mourning daughters were not helpless, traumatized survivors of some random home invasion. They were the merciless masterminds behind their own mother's killing. The arrests that followed were carried out quickly in late June. Authorities found the sisters at separate locations. One was staying at the great-grandmother's residence, while the other was visiting a friend, and officers formally placed both into custody. Given the deliberate and extraordinarily savage nature of the attack, prosecutors chose to charge the teenagers as adults, thereby making them subject to the harshest possible penalties under the law. For more than 3 years, they stubbornly maintained their innocence, sitting in a county detention facility as they waited for trial. Their united front finally started breaking apart when the overwhelming forensic evidence was methodically presented during pre-trial proceedings. Most notably, the microscopic blood spatter and DNA recovered from beneath the victim's fingernails. Once they understood the state had an airtight case constructed entirely around their own biological evidence, their psychological echo chamber finally shattered. In early 2014, hoping to avoid the near certainty of a lengthy, highly publicized trial and a possible life sentence without parole, the sisters agreed to a plea deal. They formally pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and other related criminal offenses. The judge presiding over the case sentenced each of them to 30 years in a state penitentiary. Their courtroom admissions came with chilling detachment, providing only calculated, emotionless acknowledgments of the overwhelming biological evidence against them, rather than showing any sincere remorse. The Bridal Ridge subdivision eventually resumed its peaceful routines, but a lasting, oppressive shadow remained across its immaculate lawns. The community never completely recovered from the psychological trauma of discovering that the ultimate danger had come from inside a locked, heavily alarmed home. Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead waged a violent, escalating battle for teenage independence, seeing their mother's strict affection as an unbearable prison. In their disturbing quest for complete freedom, they carried out a deliberate killing, ultimately earning themselves 3 decades behind the bars of a literal cage. Little Rock, Arkansas isn't known for producing many celebrated pastry chefs. It mostly turns out football players. Yet in 1998, on the 6th of March, a girl was born there who would grow up caring about neither football nor celebrity. Sugar, butter, and the precise chemistry of a dessert turning out perfectly were what she loved most of all. Her name was Jade Tristan Benning. She was her mother, Bridget Benning Burks's, only child, and also the daughter of her father, Dennis Browning, and stepmother, Andrea. Only children can sometimes become reserved. Jade was anything but. She became outgoing, affectionate, and impossible to overlook. She was the kid who could make friends within the first 5 minutes of entering any room. At 7, she was already cheering. First came Cheer City United, followed by Horace Mann Middle School, where she became captain, then Little Rock Central High, where she led both the junior varsity squad and, later, the varsity team. Captains aren't chosen randomly. Someone must believe you can lead. Jade continued proving worthy of that confidence year after year. Little Rock, Arkansas isn't exactly known for producing renowned pastry chefs. It mostly produces football players. Yet, in 1998, on the 6th of March, a girl was born there who would grow up drawn to neither football nor fame. Sugar, butter, and the precise chemistry behind a dessert turning out perfectly were what fascinated her. Her name was Jade Tristan Benning. She was the only child of her mother, Bridget Benning Burks, and also the daughter of her father, Browning, and stepmother, Andrea. Only children can sometimes become reserved. Jade became the opposite. She grew up outspoken, affectionate, and impossible to overlook. She was the kid who made friends within the first 5 minutes of entering any room. At 7, she was already cheering. First Cheer City United, then Horace Mann Middle School, where she became captain, then Little Rock Central High, where she led the junior varsity squad and later the varsity one too. Captains aren't chosen randomly. Someone has to believe you can lead. Jade continued earning that confidence year after year, gym after gym. She finished high school in 2016 without a clear sense of exactly how cheerleading passion would translate into adult life. Instead, she discovered flour. Jade attended Brightwater, a culinary school founded on the belief that food reveals a story about the person creating it. She completed its pastry program in 2020, entering a pandemic-scarred restaurant industry that was hiring almost no one. She found a position anyway. She became head pastry chef at Mirabella's Table, then eventually joined Nest Bar and Hideaway, a larger stage in a larger city. Along the way, she grew tired of working beneath someone else's name and began creating her own. J.B. Erie, her personal venture, 3 initials representing something she meant to make significant. Co-workers remembered her as someone who could make a shift seem shorter, upbeat, driven, thrilled about a future that at 25 remained largely unwritten. She traveled whenever she could. She gathered tattoos as some people gather stories. She watched too much Netflix and made no apologies for it. Her childhood best friend, a woman named Nejiha Jackson, who had known her since they were 6 years old, would later portray her just as nearly everyone else did. Outgoing, devoted, the sort of person who stood up for those she loved without needing to be asked. Buried inside that description was a warning that no one could have recognized at the time, even in hindsight, and nobody around her understood what that warning might eventually mean. A woman who stands up for those she loves will often protect the people who are soon to become hers, including a baby who was not born yet. In January 2022, through a dating app called Hinge, Jade connected with a man named Blay Taylor. If you had created a profile of Blay Taylor without knowing anything else about this story, you probably would have assumed he was one of the good ones. Born in March 1996, he was raised in a college football household. His father, Carl Trooper Taylor, coached one program after another, from Baylor to Auburn to Arkansas State. His mother earned a doctorate in psychology. His younger sister played Division I basketball. In that home, football wasn't simply a hobby. It was the family business. Blay excelled at it. Defensive back and punt returner for Arkansas State from 2014 to 2017. A 4-year starter, team captain, all-conference player who established school marks in punt returns and pass defense. Yet the number that made him distinctive wasn't listed on any stat sheet. He completed a bachelor's degree and an MBA before his last college football season had even ended. His pace was so rapid that officials at the time thought he could have been the sole major college football player in America to accomplish it. Arkansas State eventually named an academic award after him. Few college athletes receive a trophy bearing their name while they're still enrolled. Following football, he moved quickly into another direction. Graduate assistant at Duke, scouting assistant with the Tennessee Titans, then promoted to pro scout. By his late 20s, he had reached a place where most people in football spend a decade trying to arrive. He and Jay didn't immediately become a couple. They matched in January 2022, but didn't begin seeing one another regularly until later that year, something the defense would eventually characterize as non-exclusive, casual, undefined. Jade's version would be different, largely because her family barely knew Taylor existed, other than as the man tied to the biggest news she was about to reveal. Around September, Jade believed she might be pregnant. On November 4th, 2022, she told Taylor the child was his. Her mother recalled precisely how that conversation unfolded on her side. Jade was happy. already making plans, a nursery, baby showers, doctor's appointments. She stopped drinking. She also stopped using marijuana, which she had used casually before. Her prenatal doctor would later verify it. No alcohol, no tobacco, no illicit drugs were reported throughout the pregnancy. This was a woman arranging her life around a due date. Taylor's response was different. According to the account that later emerged, he told her he didn't want to participate. He didn't want the baby to have his name. He didn't want fatherhood. Not now. Perhaps not ever. Not this way. Jade didn't plead with him to reconsider. She told him he could leave. If necessary, she would raise the child on her own. In a text she sent around that time, she stated it plainly. She would love this child unconditionally, with or without him. That's not a woman seeking permission. That's a woman setting a boundary. And it matters because everything that follows happens on the wrong side of that boundary. Whatever Taylor privately felt, the public version softened somewhat as the months passed, according to the defense's later account. He told his parents about the pregnancy and met Jade at a park on New Year's Day 2023, where they discussed getting acquainted, maybe even co-parenting if paternity returned confirmed. Jade's closest friend, Nijia, would later testify that she hadn't even met Taylor face-to-face by then. He remained mostly on the fringes of Jade's life, there, but not truly there. He was technically part of the picture, but his place in her world remained distant, uncertain, and difficult to define, especially to the people closest to Jade. A name tied to a due date more than a partner tied to a family. By February, Jade was about 6 months pregnant. The nursery was taking shape. A second bedroom in her apartment was gradually filling with diapers, formula, the little mountain of supplies a first-time mother collects without really realizing how much room it consumes. She had already chosen a name for her daughter, Ivy. The family would eventually call her Ivy Blair. On the evening of February 25, 2023, Jade and Taylor were together inside her apartment on Lebanon Pike. It wasn't an elaborate plan. Friends came over for 15, perhaps 30 minutes. Enough time to discuss the nursery. Enough time to see Jade cheerful and ordinary and excited. The same Jade everyone had always described. They watched Jade and Taylor prepare dinner. They watched them paint. Jade's painting was colorful and hopeful, the sort of piece you'd put in a nursery. Taylor's was nearly all black, with a gray circle in the middle. He talked about midnight, about darkness, about seeing farther into the dark. Nobody there thought much about it. People say unusual things while painting. The friends departed. Only the two remained. Around 9:25 p.m., someone took a photograph. Jade is smiling. She's kissing Taylor's cheek. Whatever was going to happen, it hadn't begun yet. Or, if it had, her expression revealed nothing. 13 minutes afterward, at 9:38 p.m., Taylor phoned 911. Something had gone terribly wrong during that interval. And amid it all, before paramedics arrived, before anyone else understood that something was happening, Jade grabbed her phone and called the one person she would trust with anything, Nijia Jackson. Nijia would later recall a call unlike anything she'd ever heard from Jade. Jade told her she couldn't feel her legs. She said she couldn't move them. Then, amid the fear, she said something more. She accused Taylor in real time of putting something into her drink. She directly linked what was happening to the baby. She wanted to know what he was holding in his hand, what was in his pocket. Whatever followed, Nijia heard Jade confronting him. Then the call somehow ended. When Taylor called 911 at 9:38, he characterized what was happening as a possible allergic reaction. The dispatcher asked about the common symptoms: swelling, a rash, hives. Taylor answered no, none of that. First responders and found Jade unconscious, face down, pink frothy fluid around her mouth, without a pulse. Her Glasgow Coma Scale score was 3, the lowest score the scale permits, the score given when someone displays virtually no neurological response whatsoever. Paramedics worked on restarting her heart. Taylor, according to several accounts, was frantic, attempting to help, interfering with those working to save her. They restored a pulse. But a body can keep a heartbeat and still lose everything that mattered beforehand. And when Jade arrived at the hospital, the injury caused by those lost oxygenless minutes had already occurred. 2 days afterward, on February 27th, Ivy died. Jade did not wake. On March 6, 2023, the same date, exactly her 25th birthday, her family decided to remove her from life support. A woman who had spent her entire life being the person who showed up for others didn't get to blow out even one candle that year. Instead, she had a hospital room, a machine, and relatives gathered around a bed making the most painful decision of their lives on what should have been the simplest day of hers. The medical examiner would ultimately conclude that Jade died from acute cocaine toxicity at a concentration so severe that Nashville's chief medical examiner, a woman who had completed countless autopsies, said she had never personally encountered a level that high, not even close. There were no needle marks, no evidence of the sort of chronic use that could explain an escalating habit, only a massive sudden dose in a woman who, according to everyone who knew her, according to her doctor, hadn't consumed even a glass of wine in months. The apartment wasn't secured that night. Nobody handled it like a crime scene. Because initially, as far as anyone knew, it wasn't one. It was a medical emergency, a young pregnant woman experiencing some kind of unexplained collapse. During the following hours and days, friends and relatives came and went throughout those following hours and days. At Jade's mother's request, a co-worker let herself inside, noticed the apartment smelled strongly of cleaning products, and extinguished a candle. A family friend came in wearing gloves, carefully photographed what she discovered, and carried out a comforter marked with what proved to be vomit. Evidence nobody yet knew would later become important. And somewhere between that initial 911 call and the point when police finally regarded Lebanon Pike as a homicide scene, a drinking cup visible in an earlier photograph taken that night had simply disappeared. Investigators moved very slowly. For months, the case remained with detectives while the medical examiner's office processed the toxicology. As the laboratory results slowly trickled back over time, a homicide detective named Adam Ree gradually assumed control of a file that began as an unexplained medical collapse and was slowly becoming something else altogether. More than a full year would pass before an arrest warrant bearing Blaywon Taylor's name finally existed. A year during which he continued working, progressed in his career, and eventually accepted a position associated with Texas A&M's football program, the same sport, the same world that had defined his entire life. Jade Benning was ultimately buried as a mother who never got the chance to hold her daughter. The investigation into what really happened to her had only just begun, and more than a year would pass before it ended in an arrest. Technical analysis. Strip away the emotion, and this entire case centers on one grim, brutal forensic fact: an astonishing concentration of cocaine in a pregnant woman's bloodstream with no clear or obvious explanation at all for how it entered her system. The medical examiner testified that the level was about 7,878 nanogs per milliliter. For comparison, a fatal overdose in an average case usually falls far below 1,000. Whatever Jade Benning consumed that night, it wasn't merely a casual line of cocaine, and it wasn't something her body showed any sign of having developed prior tolerance for. There were no nasal lesions, no injection marks, nothing indicating a concealed pattern of use. The medical examiner's working theory was oral ingestion, meaning it was something she consumed as a drink, not something she snorted or injected. That's where the theory makes the case complicated, because the state never uncovered a smoking gun. Investigators examined every bottle and glass they recovered from the apartment. A pink lemonade bottle, another juice container, a glass containing liquor, and none tested positive for cocaine. An analyst explained on the stand that washing a glass can eliminate every trace of a drug, which cuts both ways. It explains why the tests were negative, but it also left the state asking a jury to convict from an absence of evidence rather than its presence. What the state possessed was biological. Testing the vomit-stained comforter, the one a family friend removed from the apartment before police ever secured the scene, detected cocaine and a compound called cokeethylene, which forms only when cocaine and alcohol are metabolized together inside the body. Cocaine traces also appeared in fetal liver tissue. Taken together, that showed massive recent exposure consistent with something consumed rapidly around the time Jade collapsed. The defense spent much of the trial challenging exactly how that evidence had been gathered in the first place. For hours, the apartment was never handled as a crime scene. Several people entered it, shifted objects, cleaned surfaces, and took items away. Everyone meant well. Nobody yet knew a homicide investigation was about to follow. A blood sample was reportedly carried in a tube, lacking the standard forensic preservative. A defense toxicologist maintained that the laboratory couldn't even establish whether the drug had been swallowed or delivered by another method. There was also a legitimate issue involving fentanyl, found not only on the stained portion of the comforter, but also within a supposedly clean comparison sample, raising serious contamination concerns that the defense pressed forcefully. The prosecution countered with Jade's initial urine screen, collected before hospital treatment started, which tested negative for fentanyl and positive for cocaine. That timing point became one of the trial's most significant technical disputes. Ultimately, prosecutors based their case less upon one conclusive object and more upon the evidence as a whole. A missing cup, an undisturbed-looking apartment, an extraordinary toxicology finding, and a dying woman's own accusation made spontaneously before anyone had constructed a theory around it. Psychological analysis. Cases such as this often follow a pattern with little connection to any particular person's diagnosis, and much more to do with how unwanted responsibility is managed under pressure. A familiar relationship dynamic appears when one partner sees pregnancy as an opportunity, while the other sees it as a threat to the life already established. When that difference emerges early and gets stated directly, "I don't want this, I don't want to be involved," it generally ends in one of two ordinary ways. The unwilling partner leaves or eventually accepts the situation. What separates cases like this from those outcomes is a third route. One investigators encounter much less frequently, but recognize quickly when it appears. Acceptance presented as a shield while the rejection underneath remains unchanged. That pattern can accompany a particular form of image management. People who have spent years creating a carefully polished public identity, the honor roll, the record book, the community service resume, can sometimes perceive a threat to that identity as more pressing than nearly anything else. Because that identity has become what they are defending, accomplishment itself doesn't cause violence. Rather, for some people, the story they have created about themselves becomes something they will take extraordinary measures to preserve, even when their private reality bears almost no resemblance to the public image. From the victim's perspective, another psychological pattern repeatedly appears in cases like these too, and it deserves equal attention alongside the offender's conduct. The instinct to continue granting someone the benefit of the doubt until doing so is no longer possible. Jade wasn't naive. She established a boundary early. She told Taylor directly that she would raise the baby without him if necessary. Yet boundaries don't always withstand hope. And hope isn't a character flaw. That doesn't mean she should have known what was coming. It means that people often keep hoping for a different outcome because accepting the worst possibility can feel impossible until circumstances leave no room for hope or any reason left to wait. Believing a reluctant partner could still change his mind, could still appear, could still become the person you need him to be. That's not simply bad judgment. It's among the most human instincts there is, and everyone understands it. And predatory relationships are often designed to exploit precisely that instinct. What's truly disturbing about this pattern isn't anger, it's control. Quietly, deliberately eliminating a problem instead of confronting it reflects a very different psychological profile from a crime of passion. It points to planning, patience, and a willingness to let someone think the relationship was settling down right until the moment it mattered most. Another angle. Here's the detail that should haunt you at night, more than almost anything else in this case. This might not have been the first time. Years before Jade Benning ever matched with Blay-One Taylor through a dating app, a former girlfriend named Apple Denny says she spoke with him about another unwanted pregnancy, not Jade's, someone else's. According to her testimony, Taylor asked whether she could obtain abortion medication he could, as she put it, secretly put into another woman's drink without her knowledge. Denny says she never obtained the pills. Snorts. She says she has no idea exactly what ultimately happened to that pregnancy. No criminal case was ever developed around that conversation. Nobody was ever charged over it. It appears in the public record only as one woman's recollection presented at trial, specifically because prosecutors believed it was too similar to what happened to Jade to be coincidence. Think about that for a moment and consider what it means. If Denny's account is accurate, the method wasn't invented from nothing on the night Jade collapsed. It may have existed years earlier as something Taylor had considered, talked about openly, and asked another person to help him accomplish, and it went nowhere, and nothing happened, and life just carried on. There's no way of knowing how many other conversations like that might exist, unrecorded, untestified, never presented in court because nobody ever thought to ask. That's the piece of this case that a verdict cannot resolve, no matter what the final judgment says. The verdict itself leaves another question the jury never needed to answer aloud. Jurors found Taylor guilty of second-degree murder for Jade's death, a knowing killing, but not one they determined was premeditated. For Ivy, the unborn daughter, they found him guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Put those two verdicts beside each other, and they point towards something profoundly disturbing, that in this jury's view, The true target that night wasn't Jade at all. It was the baby. Under that interpretation, Jade's death was simply what occurred along the way. Taylor is scheduled to receive his formal sentence on September 9, 2026. His lawyers have already said he maintains his innocence and intends to appeal, citing the unsecured apartment, the missing cup, the fentanyl contamination issues, and the fact that no drinking container ever tested positive for the drug that killed her. Whether any of that ultimately works remains unknown to everyone involved at this point. What isn't unknown is this. Somewhere, there could be another woman who once had a conversation with Blaine Taylor that seemed strange at the time, and never had a reason to tell anyone about it until now. Some missing person cases start with uncertainty. Others begin with immediate concern. But for 55-year-old Jennifer McCormick, concern existed from the very first moment her disappearance was discovered. Jennifer wasn't simply another missing person. Her family said she was vulnerable, relied on those around her, and was unlikely to remain safe for very long without help. That was what made the circumstances especially frightening. Jennifer McCormick lived with her family in Alamo Township, Michigan, at a home on the 8,000 block of West A Drive. Relatives described her as someone who depended strongly on routine and familiar surroundings. Although she could handle many everyday responsibilities on her own, Jennifer had high-functioning Down syndrome, so abrupt changes, unfamiliar circumstances, or moments of confusion could quickly become overwhelming. Her family understood her habits, knew her routines, and recognized that something wasn't right. On the evening of May 13, 2026, Jennifer disappeared. Investigators believe she was last at her home at around 5:30 p.m. Initially, there seemed to be nothing unusual about the day. There were no arguments, family conflicts, serious incidents, or anything else indicating that Jennifer intended to leave. Later, her family told police that the only explanation they could imagine was that some interruption to her routine might have unsettled her. To most people, a minor alteration in daily plans may simply be inconvenient. For a person who depends greatly on consistency and structure, though, that kind of change can carry far greater weight. Investigators learned that Jennifer may have become upset following some alteration to her usual schedule. What exactly that change was, however, remains unknown. Jennifer's brother was among the first to realize that something was wrong. They lived together, and on the day she vanished, he briefly left the house to run an errand. By his account, he was away for about 90 minutes. It wasn't unusual for Jennifer to remain alone for brief periods. She had done so numerous times without any problems. Yet when her brother came back, Jennifer was nowhere to be found. Initially, he thought she could be close by. Perhaps she had stepped out for a walk. Perhaps she had gone somewhere familiar. Maybe she would be back within minutes. But with every passing moment, his concern increased. He began searching the nearby area himself. He checked surrounding roads and places she regularly visited. He searched for anything that might point to her whereabouts. Hours went by, nothing. After roughly 3 hours of unsuccessful searching, he decided to call law enforcement. Investigators immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. Because Jennifer was vulnerable, every hour that passed was important. Police rapidly opened a missing person investigation and started piecing together information about where she might have gone. Unfortunately, a significant obstacle appeared almost at once. Jennifer didn't have a cell phone. Investigators therefore had no GPS information, no call history, and no digital trail to trace. In many current missing person investigations, a phone can be among the most full tools available to police. For Jennifer, that resource simply wasn't available. Investigators next turned to her financial records. Maybe she had bought something to eat. Maybe she had paid for a ride. Maybe she had registered at a hotel. Once again, though, the trail appeared to disappear almost immediately. Authorities found that Jennifer's credit cards hadn't been used since the day she went missing. There were no purchases, no transactions, and no indication that she had secured food, transportation, or shelter. That complete lack of activity made the concerns even greater. If Jennifer were alive and trying to look after herself, investigators would normally expect some financial activity. Instead, there was none. As word of her disappearance spread across Alamo Township and nearby communities, residents began arranging their own searches. Volunteers worked alongside law enforcement, checking fields, wooded areas, roadsides, and stretches of open land. Unfortunately, weather conditions appeared to complicate their efforts. Heavy rain passed through the area during the searches, creating difficult conditions and potentially washing away evidence that could have assisted investigators. Even with those obstacles, volunteers kept looking. Dozens of acres were searched. Teams examined wooded paths, open fields, ditches, drainage zones, abandoned buildings, and any location where Jennifer might have looked for shelter. Yet day after day, there were still no clues, no belongings, no verified sightings, and no indication of the direction she may have taken. As the investigation continued, authorities began weighing a possibility that families of vulnerable missing people often fear most. Maybe Jennifer had only gone out for a walk. Maybe she became confused. Maybe she lost her sense of direction and traveled much farther than she intended. Without a phone, assistance, or any means of contacting someone, even a brief walk could quickly turn dangerous, especially for someone who depends on familiar surroundings. Despite the extensive search, investigators found no evidence pointing toward foul play. There were no indications of an abduction, no signs of violence, and no suspicious activity directly associated with her disappearance. Still, the absence of suspected foul play didn't make the case any less urgent. Jennifer was still missing, and her family remained determined to find answers. The resources dedicated to this effort have been exhaustive, but we're not done. We won't stop searching until we successfully bring Jennifer home. As days became weeks, her loved ones refused to abandon hope. They kept telling her story, sharing photographs, handing out missing person flyers, and asking one basic question: where was Jennifer McCormick? Authorities issued a detailed description, hoping someone might recognize her. Jennifer is described as having brown hair and blue eyes. She is approximately 4 feet 8 inches tall and weighs about 150 pounds. At the time she disappeared, she was wearing a red button-down sweater, black pants, and black boots. Investigators also disclosed a significant identifying detail. Jennifer had taken a black purse when she left, and perhaps most notably, she was carrying either a Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse plush toy, a distinctive possession that searchers hoped could help identify her. According to the latest public information, Jennifer McCormick remains missing. Her family continues looking. Investigators are still pursuing leads, while hope remains that someone, somewhere, recalls seeing a woman with a black purse and a cherished Disney plush toy. You know, maybe something was overlooked, maybe a drone missed something, maybe a dog missed something. And we're not going to stop until Jennifer McCormick comes home. Even the tiniest detail might become the lead that finally brings Jennifer home. Anyone with information about Jennifer McCormick's whereabouts is urged to contact the Kalamazoo Dispatch Authority immediately at 269-488-8911.
She left home telling her parents she'd be spending the night with friends. They assume she left in her white P-Reg Rover 214i. She hasn't been seen since.
Nothing to suggest why she would disappear. She just didn't come home one night.
Sometime late in the evening of June 30th, 2005, a white Rover 214i drove away from Bolton Avenue in Richmond, North Yorkshire, and vanished into the surrounding countryside. Behind the wheel was 19-year-old Jenny Nickel. She carried a bag, apparently containing camping equipment of some kind. She kissed her mother goodbye, explained that she would not return that night, and then stepped through the front door. For Jenny, this was nothing unusual, and she often did that sort of thing. 4 days later, her mother reported her missing. That same afternoon, Ann Nickel discovered her daughter's car deserted in a pub car park. The engine was off, the doors were locked, and the keys were gone. 3 days after that, Ann and her husband Brian entered Sandbeck Plantation on the edge of town, where they discovered Jenny's cosmetics and a nightdress hidden beneath a layer of leaves, as if someone had intentionally concealed them there. Jenny's phone went silent on July 14, 2005, after a series of messages reached her friends and father from areas around Carlisle and the Scottish borders, claiming she was fine, living in Scotland with her boyfriend, and that nobody needed to worry. Police would eventually determine that Jenny almost certainly had not sent any of them. She had already been missing for 2 weeks when investigators started to realize what they were truly dealing with, while the man they would ultimately charge in connection with her case had remained less than a mile from her home throughout the entire time. Before getting into what investigators uncovered, it is important to understand who Jenny Nickel was. Jenny was 19, living with her parents, Ann and Brian, on Bolton Avenue in Richmond, North Yorkshire. Brian, her father, was a retired Army major, while Ann, her mother, had worked as a cleaner. Their home was quiet and unremarkable, set along a quiet, unremarkable street. Jenny herself, however, was not one to remain quiet for very long. She played guitar with a local rock group called No Fouling. The band had developed a genuine following through Richmond's pub circuit, played the Richmond Live Music Festival, and reached the Battle of the Bands final in 2002. A devoted admirer of Jimi Hendrix, Jenny was the sort of fan who did more than simply hear the music. She took it in. Music was not merely a weekend pastime for her. It shaped the way she experienced and navigated the world. She held a job at the local co-op and enjoyed spending time outside. Camping came naturally to her, almost as casually and routinely as other people taking a walk, with no particular reason required. People knew her from the pubs and the streets, and in that kind of small market town, being known by name still carried weight. She was a familiar presence around town, and easy to recognize there. Her friends did notice one thing about her. Jenny kept her personal matters to herself. Opening up did not come easily. When something troubled her, she tended to deal with it alone. That privacy and self-contained nature would later complicate the investigation considerably. On June 30th, 2005, during the evening, she packed what appeared to be camping equipment, told her mother she would not be home that night, and left the Bolton Avenue house through the front door. Ann Nichols would never see her daughter again. Jenny had two plans arranged for the coming days. The next day, she was supposed to collect a friend for a night out, and on Monday morning she was expected at the co-op for her shift. She attended neither. Her friend called, but Jenny did not answer. The unanswered calls continued across the remainder of the weekend and into Monday. When Jenny did not turn up for work and offered no explanation, concern among those close to her became genuine alarm. 4 days after Jenny left home, Ann eventually reported her daughter missing. That afternoon, Ann began searching herself. Not far from the house, she came across Jenny's white Rover 214i abandoned in a pub car park. It was locked and empty. There was nothing to indicate where Jenny had gone or how she had departed. Police immediately circulated a description. Jenny was slim, stood 5'6", had green eyes, and wore fair, shoulder-length hair, usually tied back in a ponytail. When she was last seen, Jenny was wearing blue jeans, black trainers, a sleeveless crop top, and a hooded parka she regularly wore. Hundreds of posters were distributed around Richmond and nearby areas. Door-to-door inquiries followed. Several days into the search, Ann and Brian entered Sandbeck Plantation, a thick woodland area on the town's edge, and discovered something that left them stunned. Jenny's cosmetics and nightdress were partly hidden beneath leaves. Someone had put them there, or had abandoned them there hurriedly. On July 6th, North Yorkshire Police publicly announced that they were becoming extremely concerned about Jenny's welfare. The next day, Richmond Police Station became the location of an incident room, with 20 officers allocated to the case. Detective Inspector Pete Martin assumed control of the investigation. On July 10th, he issued a personal appeal, directed not only toward witnesses but toward Jenny herself. He asked her to make contact in any way possible, phone her parents, and reassure someone that she was safe. At the Bolton Avenue home, the phones remained silent. After June 30th produced no confirmed sightings, Detective Inspector Martin and his team began expanding their inquiry from everything established about Jenny's life, her routines, relationships, and social circles. What emerged would completely alter the course of the investigation. Jenny had been involved with David Hodgson, a married man in his 40s and father to 2 daughters. She had known him for years. She had attended school with his children. Investigators would later establish that David had known Jenny since her early teenage years and had gradually developed a personal connection with her over an extended period. When questioned initially, he denied having any personal involvement. Later, he changed his story. David admitted to 5 separate encounters with Jenny, while maintaining that the relationship had begun only after she turned 16. Investigators were doubtful from the outset. The forensic findings told a very different story. DNA analysis established that Jenny and David had been together inside 2 wooden hides built by David and his brother in the local woodland. Yet David had told police he had never taken Jenny to either of those structures. The forensic evidence refuted him outright. The evidence against his version was becoming increasingly difficult for investigators to dismiss at that stage entirely. 9 days after Jenny was last seen, David Hodgson was taken in for formal questioning. He insisted that they were not involved in a relationship. The officers across the table from him were unconvinced. Then, the next day, something changed. A text appeared on the phone belonging to Jenny's friend, Jennifer. It said, Hi, Jen. Tell Jack I'm okay. No, everyone's going to be mad. Tell them I'm sorry. Living in Scotland with my boyfriend. Dad's going to be furious with me. Mom don't give a shite. Hope Nick didn't grass me up. Keeping phone off. Tell Dad car jumps out of gear in stores. Put it back in auction. Tell him I'm sorry. Around that same time, another message reached a second friend, Nicola. Thought you were grassing me up. Might be in trouble with my dad. Told Mom I was lying. Didn't give a shite. Been to Keswick camping. Was great. Have to go. See ya. Both texts originated around Carlisle. Then, on July 14th, Jenny's father received a message himself. Why do you hate me? I know Mom does. Told her I was going. I ain't coming back and the pigs won't find me. I am happy living up here. Everyone hates me in Richmond. Only mate I got is Jack. Text you a couple of weeks. Tell pigs I'm nearly 20. Ain't coming back. They can shite off. That text originated near the Scottish borders. For a short time, the messages offered some relief. Anne Nichol, desperate for any indication of her daughter's whereabouts, traveled to the places from which the messages had originated. She discovered nothing. No sign of Jenny. No one who had seen her. Jenny's phone was never switched on again after July 14th. It has never been found. Detective Inspector Martin examined the messages just as closely. He observed that they included precise personal information. The mechanical problem with Jenny's car, the names of her friends, details a stranger could not have known. Yet instead of comforting him, that precision increased his concern. When someone leaves voluntarily, investigators generally expect to find a trail. Odd bank withdrawals and travel bookings, places to stay, contact with somebody willing to accommodate them. Here, none of that was present. Jenny had taken out no money. She had paid in advance for 25 tanning sessions at a nearby salon and had used just 2. Detective Inspector Martin stated his conclusion clearly. He believed somebody else had sent the messages. Somebody close enough to Jenny to know the personal details contained within them. Somebody who needed her family to think she was alive. As the inquiry expanded, another concern surfaced. Although David had been the main focus of the initial inquiries, investigators learned that Jenny had also become close to David's brother, Robert Hodgson. The pair had gone camping together during the weeks before her disappearance. Robert later attempted to contact Jenny repeatedly by phone, but got no answer. He eventually brought police to the place where they had camped. Nothing turned up there, yet investigators repeatedly returned to one particular detail. On the night Jenny vanished, David Hodgson had left his home too. He told his family he was going camping. He came back the next morning. On the days those messages were sent, first from Carlisle and then from the Scottish borders, David had rented a car. His movements throughout that period could not be independently confirmed. When investigators inspected the rental car, its recorded mileage matched a journey to and from those precise locations. October 6, 2005 would have marked Jenny's 20th birthday. Anne Nichol observed the date by putting a large banner outside the co-op where her daughter had worked, once again asking for information. CCTV images recorded during the days immediately before Jenny vanished were released publicly. Then, on November 3, 2005, 4 months after Jenny left the Bolton Avenue house, North Yorkshire Police issued a formal announcement. This had ceased to be a missing person inquiry. It was now being handled as a major criminal investigation. That same day, David Hodgson spoke to the Northern Echo. He described receiving threats after his connection with Jenny became public. He said Jenny had told him, shortly before disappearing, that she intended to leave. He also revealed for the first time that he had loaned her a substantial amount of money.
Let's see if we can get a result now in a case that is fraught with emotion, that of 19-year-old Jenny Nichol. For 6 months now, her mum and dad in Yorkshire have been frantic to know what's become of her. And you must have been frantic when she just disappeared.
Well, I was. Nothing to suggest why she would disappear. She just didn't come home one night, and I didn't find her car until the Monday in the car park, as you just said.
She hadn't taken any money out of the bank, or she hadn't
Nope.
taken a passport or made any preparation?
Passport's still there, money's still in the bank. There was no preparation for leaving home at all. She just didn't come back one evening.
Is that her teddy bear?
This is the teddy that her dad bought her on Christmas, and that went from the home maybe 2.5 months before she left.
So this is a replica, is it?
This is a replica, yeah.
With a little khaki suit on.
Absolutely,
if
yeah.
anybody's seen that, we want to know about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know, Pete Martin, Why have you come to Crime Watch on this now?
We've received some new information which now suggests the answer to this investigation is very, very local.
Very, very local to Richmond in Yorkshire.
To Richmond itself in Yorkshire, yes.
And yet there were text messages sent on Jenny's phone from Jedburgh and from Carlisle.
Yes, there were, and I believe those text messages were sent by somebody who was very close to Jenny, perhaps even a boyfriend, with the intention of creating a belief that Jenny's still alive, which I don't believe to be the case.
You think she was murdered?
Yes, I do.
So either the killer or perhaps an accomplice deliberately tried to set a false trail?
That's right, yes.
Do you know the whole network of Jenny's friends? I mean, I don't know if you know all the friends she had. Very few people do of teenage daughters. Did you know everybody who knew her?
No, Jenny is quite a deep person and kept a lot to herself. So no, I don't know who her was.
You know some. Presumably you now need to get a complete matrix of everybody.
We do, yes. We're keen to trace all Jenny's friends, and in particular to find anybody amongst that circle of friends who visited the Carlisle and Jedburgh areas on the dates those messages were sent.
So far from this being a complete open mystery with nothing to go on, you've actually got quite a lot of pieces of this jigsaw puzzle already. Is that right?
We're just seeking the final piece now.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, well, if you can provide that final piece, if you have any information, call us here in the studio or call the incident room 01609 768 111.
In January 2006, David Hodgson and his brother Robert were arrested over Jenny's disappearance. Robert was freed without charge as police continued investigating Jenny's disappearance and circumstances. David was released on bail while further inquiries continued as officers pursued more possible investigative leads. 2 months later, in March 2006, North Yorkshire Police brought in a team of retired senior officers to conduct an independent review with fresh eyes on every decision, every lead, and every piece of evidence gathered so far. Then on March 27, 2006, 9 months after Jenny vanished, officers carrying out fingertip searches throughout the Sandbeck plantation found something. Under the dense undergrowth of the woodland, they found Jenny's teddy bear in her portable stereo, the first physical evidence placing her in that area after she left home. Detective Inspector Martin called it significant. He said both items represented meaningful forensic opportunities. More than 150 acres of woodland were examined. Soldiers joined police officers. Caves, mine shafts, moorland, and remote stretches of countryside were searched. The operation was exhaustive, covering every area investigators considered directly relevant. Jenny was not found, and no answers came. 1 year after she disappeared, 100 people gathered at a local church for a remembrance service. Jenny's aunt read a eulogy written by Anne and Brian. It said, quite simply, "Jenny is unique. She is our daughter, a young woman, and we will carry her forever in our hearts and minds. She is our wean, and we will catch up with her soon, all being well." Meanwhile, the investigation had acquired a new dimension, one that no one had anticipated. While forensic investigators examined her father Brian's laptop for emails and contacts that might shed light on Jenny's state of mind, they made a discovery entirely unrelated to her disappearance. Investigators later discovered unrelated criminal material on the device. Police confirmed it had no connection to Jenny's disappearance, but the revelation compounded an already unbearable public ordeal for a family that had already lost everything. Through all of it, investigators kept their focus on David Hodgson, and what they were building piece by piece was becoming impossible to dismiss. The physical evidence had placed David Hodgson in proximity to Jenny. The hired car and its unaccounted mileage had placed him on the roads between Richmond, Carlisle, and the Scottish borders on the exact days the messages were sent. The DNA evidence had directly contradicted his account of their relationship, but the piece of the investigation that would prove most decisive was one that had never been used in a North Yorkshire courtroom before. Forensic linguistics? Professor Malcolm Coulthard was one of the most respected practitioners in his field. He had worked on several nationally significant cases and carried a reputation for precision. When North Yorkshire Police brought him onto the Jenny Nicol investigation, they handed him a substantial body of material. Transcripts of more than 100 messages sent by David Hodgson, 11 messages sent by Jenny herself, and the 3 messages that had arrived in July 2005 after she was last seen. Professor Coulthard's first task was straightforward in principle and demanding in practice. He needed to determine whether the post-disappearance messages could have been written by Jenny. He began with the mechanics of how she typed. Jenny used the number 2 as a substitute for the word to, a common shorthand in text messaging at the time. But her pattern was specific. She entered the number directly against the next word, without leaving any space between them. Messages sent following her disappearance employed that same substitution, yet included a gap, a subtle distinction. It was precisely the sort of detail someone imitating another person's writing style could overlook completely. Jenny wrote, "I'm and I'm not." The messages following her disappearance instead used "I am" and "ain't." Jenny wrote my name as Q and spelled phone with an F. The subsequent messages used me, C, and the conventional spelling. Across 11 messages, Jenny's voice displayed a clear internal consistency. The 3 messages sent following her disappearance did not correspond with it. Professor Coulthard's assessment was restrained, yet unmistakable. Jenny was highly unlikely to have sent those messages. The next stage of his examination focused on whether David Hodgson could have authored them. Using David's personal message history and handwriting samples police had instructed him to provide during the investigation, the professor found a number of shared characteristics. The word "off" written with 1 F instead of 2. It was a recurring mistake in David's writing, so deeply established that, during the handwriting exercise, he actually had to pause and ask an officer for the correct spelling. The word "might" written as "might", a lack of apostrophes in terms such as "ain't" and "didn't". Every one of these peculiarities appeared within David's known messages. Everyone also appeared within the messages sent after Jenny vanished. Professor Coulthard carefully defined the limits of his finding. From a linguistic perspective, he could not definitively say David had composed the messages. What he could say was that David possessed a substantial number of their identifying features and belonged to a very small group of credible senders. The picture assembled throughout almost 2 years of investigation had now acquired its final piece. Investigators determined that David Hodgson had arranged to meet Jenny on the evening of June 30, 2005. Something had occurred between them that night, an argument, a confrontation, and Jenny had never gone back home, that he had hidden what happened to her somewhere in the nearby countryside, and that during the days after her disappearance, once he had been brought in for questioning, he had sent those 3 messages from Carlisle on the Scottish borders, driving the hired vehicle hundreds of miles through northern England to create the impression that Jenny was alive, that she had deliberately left, and that police were wasting their efforts searching for her. By May 2007, almost 2 years after Jenny Nicol left the house on Bolton Avenue, 47-year-old David Hodgson had been formally charged over her death. Robert Turnbull, North Yorkshire's chief Crown prosecutor, openly acknowledged that this was an unusual case. Jenny had never been located, still he was satisfied, following careful and detailed consideration of all the evidence, that a realistic prospect of conviction existed. The charge would proceed. David Hodgson was 47 years old. Richmond, North Yorkshire, was where he lived, less than a mile from the Nicol family house on Bolton Avenue. He was married. He had 2 daughters. He maintained regular employment. He was familiar in the same pubs, along the same streets, within the same narrow radius of small-town life Jenny passed through each day. On the surface, there was nothing that attracted attention, nothing that distinguished him from any other middle-aged man living in a quiet North Yorkshire market town. Yet the chronology of his relationship with Jenny Nicol presented an entirely different picture. He had first met her when she was a 14-year-old schoolgirl attending the same school as his daughters. From then onward, according to what investigators established, he had been developing a connection with her, slowly, discreetly, across the years. By the time Jenny reached adulthood, the relationship between them was already profoundly unequal. He was in his 40s. She was a young woman who had known him since she was a child. That imbalance existed from the outset. During his initial questioning, David denied having any personal involvement with Jenny whatsoever. Later, he altered that account, admitting 5 occasions of contact, while maintaining that it had started only after she turned 16. Forensic evidence showed the pair had been together inside the wooden hides he and his brother had built in the nearby woodland, structures he had originally insisted he had never brought her to. He had lied from their very first conversation. The behavioral pattern surrounding Jenny's disappearance supplied additional weight. On June 30th, 2005, the evening Jenny left home, David departed as well. He told his family that he was going camping. The next morning, he came back alone. As the days passed, Jenny's family searched while police circulated her description throughout North Yorkshire, and David hired a vehicle. The mileage recorded on that car during the period when the text messages were sent matched a journey from Richmond to Carlisle, then to the Scottish borders, and back. His movements on those trips could not be independently confirmed. He had no explanation for the mileage. His relationship with Jenny had also developed another dimension during the weeks before she vanished. Jenny had become close to his brother Robert. They had gone camping together, and as that relationship grew closer, people who knew David noticed that he had become progressively possessive and resentful. He was characterized as jealous, the sort of jealousy that could not remain hidden. Whenever he saw Jenny speaking with other men, his anger became visibly apparent. The theory investigators were now pursuing was straightforward. David Hodgson had arranged to meet Jenny on June 30. Something had occurred between them that evening, and during the days afterward, beginning the morning after his return from camping, he had been deliberately building a version of events intended to suggest that Jenny had willingly chosen to vanish. The messages, the mileage, the altered accounts, the denial of a relationship that DNA evidence had already disproved. For 5 years before she vanished, David Hodgson had been deeply embedded in Jenny Nichols's life. He was familiar with her family, knew her friends, understood the mechanical problem with her car, and the names she gave the people closest to her, and he had turned every one of those details into a story he hoped would survive scrutiny. Nearly 2 years had passed before it was dismantled, yet eventually it collapsed entirely. The criminal trial of David Hodgson lasted 5 weeks at Leeds Crown Court, but what the prosecution presented to the jury was never one solitary, conclusive piece of evidence. Instead, it was a chain, each detail appearing before the previous one had completely settled, forming a case that offered the defense no believable opening. The evidence worked cumulatively, rather than depending upon any single dramatic revelation, and each strand strengthened the others before the jury reached its decision. It started with DNA. Forensic testing established that David Hodgson and Jenny Nichol had been together inside 2 wooden hides constructed in the nearby woodland. During questioning, David told police he had never taken Jenny to those structures. The DNA proved otherwise. That lone inconsistency laid the groundwork for everything that followed. A man had lied about the simplest facts concerning his relationship with the missing woman. Next came the hired vehicle. On the dates when the 3 text messages were sent, from Carlisle on one occasion and from the Scottish borders on another, David Hodgson had rented a car. When that vehicle was returned, its recorded mileage matched. In both distance and direction, a journey from Richmond to those precise locations and back. He had no explanation for the miles, nor could he account for where he had been throughout those trips. The vehicle had covered the roads linking David Hodgson with messages he claimed not to have sent. After that came the messages themselves. Professor Malcolm Coulthard's forensic linguistic examination was presented before the jury with careful, systematic precision. Jenny's established writing habits, the way she joined the number 2 directly to the next word, her preference for I'm instead of I am, her spelling of phone with an F, and her regular use of my and see you, were absent from the 3 messages sent after her disappearance. The voice within them was different. The habits were missing. Instead, those same 3 messages contained habits corresponding with David Hodgson's known writing. The word off written using one F. The word might written as might. Apostrophes missing from ain't and didn't. These mistakes appeared so regularly in David's own messages that, during the handwriting exercise requested by police, he had actually needed to ask an officer how off was spelled correctly. The professor placed David inside an extremely small group of potential senders. Considering everything else the prosecution had established, that group effectively amounted to one name. Next came evidence concerning his movements and conduct. On the night Jenny disappeared, David had left home too, telling his family he was going camping. He came back alone the next morning, offering no explanation of where he had gone or whom he had been with. As the following days passed, Jenny's search intensified and David's name started appearing in the investigation. His accounts changed. First came the denial of any relationship. Then came the limited admission. He maintained he had never taken her to the hides. DNA directly refuted that claim. Then there was the evidence from Jenny's own life concerning whether she was likely to have disappeared voluntarily before leaving. She had withdrawn no money from her bank account. No transport had been organized. No accommodation had been reserved. She had contacted nobody about arranging somewhere to stay. She had prepaid for 25 tanning sessions and completed only 2. She had made plans to collect a friend the following day. She was scheduled to work on Monday. Those were not the choices of someone preparing to leave. They were the choices of someone expecting to return home. The prosecution's case remained clear and consistent. David Hodgson had arranged to meet Jenny on the evening of June 30, 2005. Something had taken place between them. He had hidden what happened to her. Then, starting with his first text message from Carlisle, he had used the following days to construct a version of events intended to convince police that Jenny Nicol had deliberately abandoned her own life. Every part of that construction, once scrutinized, had fallen apart. After 10 hours of deliberation, the jury reached its decision. On a February morning in 2008, they delivered a unanimous verdict. David Hodgson was convicted in connection with the death of Jenny Nicol. He stood inside the dock and moved. There was no reaction, nothing resembling acknowledgement of what had just been decided. The man who had spent almost 3 years creating a version of events in which Jenny had simply abandoned her life received the jury's verdict with precisely the same emotionless composure he had shown throughout the entire case, without any visible change in his manner or expression. Mr. Justice Openshaw spoke to him personally and directly before passing sentence, addressing the defendant in the courtroom. He said it was clear the pair had arranged to meet on the evening of June 30, 2005, and that the evidence proving David responsible for Jenny's disappearance and death was, in his words, completely overwhelming. He observed that David's concealment of what had occurred had intentionally and repeatedly prolonged the suffering of her family and those who loved her. He said he had no doubt that knowing Jenny lay somewhere on the moors would continue causing her family pain for as long as that place remained undiscovered. Then he delivered the line that struck hardest in that courtroom. The defendant has shown not the slightest regret or remorse. David Hodgson received a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years. For Anne and Brian Nicol, the verdict delivered a measure of justice, but not what they needed most. Their daughter still had not been found. David Hodgson knew her location, and from the moment she disappeared, he had chosen to keep it secret. He had preserved that silence through 2 years of investigation, 5 weeks of proceedings, the announcement of the verdict, and the sentencing. He has kept it ever since. The family's ordeal did not finish or truly come to an end in that courtroom, despite the verdict and sentence. Across the 5-week trial, Jenny's private life was subjected to sustained scrutiny by the defense. Her parents were questioned extensively about their family life. Witnesses were brought to tears. Anne and Brian later characterized the experience as character assassination. Their daughter's character, their own credibility, their family's private history, everything was dissected in open court. While David Hodgson sat listening and continued denying everything, Jenny's parents had known nothing about her connection to David until it emerged during proceedings. They had not been aware and were forced to hear every detail publicly and in full inside a courtroom, while David Hodgson sat only feet away from them. They later spoke publicly and supported the family of Millie Dowler, a young girl whose relatives had faced a comparable experience during the trial of the man convicted in her case. The Nichols joined the Dowlers in demanding reform of the justice system, seeking greater protection for victims' families from additional harm caused by the legal process itself. For us, the trial has been a truly awful experience. We have felt that our family, having already suffered so much, has been on trial just as much as Mr. Belfield. They said the system required meaningful change in the way victims' families were treated during proceedings. They called for greater support for those giving evidence. They described seeing relatives questioned individually, their characters attacked, their grief deepened, while the person responsible for everything continued constructing his fiction from the dock. David Hodgson filed several appeals against his conviction during the years that followed. Not one of those appeals succeeded, and none changed the conviction that had already been reached. After sentencing, his case reached the parole board, and that was where legislation, created partly because of cases exactly like Jenny's, became directly relevant. Helen's Law, formally enacted in January 2021. Helen's Law has moved one step closer to being introduced today. It is named for murdered 22-year-old Helen McCourt, and her mother had campaigned for it. Mari McCourt has never been able to lay her daughter to rest because Helen's killer refuses to disclose where her body lies. Now Mari wants prisoners kept behind bars until they reveal crucial details about their crimes, including information about where victims have been left as the prisoners. Disclosure of information about victims. Act 2020 established that when a convicted person refuses to reveal the location of a missing person, That refusal must be considered by the parole board when assessing release. David Hodgson had never revealed where Jenny was. He had never given her family any information about what had happened to her or where she had been left. The parole board referred to Helen's law as a principal reason for denying his release, and Nickel addressed this directly and unequivocally. She said that if David Hodgson believed his continued denial might somehow guarantee his release after 18 years, allowing him to leave prison and resume his pretense of innocence, he now needed to reconsider. His refusal to speak, she said, was evidence that he remained a danger. Any future parole hearing would have to consider that. At the time this episode was recorded, David Hodgson remained imprisoned. Jenny Nickel took up a guitar because she loved music, not because anybody instructed her to. Not because it was practical or sensible or something a girl from a quiet market town in North Yorkshire was expected to do. Because Jimi Hendrix stirred something inside her that she could not ignore. She formed a band. They performed at the Richmond Live Music Festival. They reached the final of Battle of the Bands. She worked her shifts at the co-op, walked the same streets, visited the same pubs, and kept her private life close to her chest as she always had. Not because she was secretive, but because that was simply who she was. On June 30, 2005, she packed a bag and walked out of the house on Bolton Avenue. She was 19 years old. She had paid for 23 unused tanning sessions. She had plans for the next day. She had a shift at the beginning of the week. An entire ordinary future lay ahead of her. None of that ordinary future ever arrived, and none of those expected days came to pass. What Jenny Nickel lost was not something abstract. It was tangible. It was every year she never got to live, every stage she never got to stand upon, every song she never got to perform. It was the camping trips and pub nights and ordinary Wednesday afternoons that belong to everyone and go unnoticed until they disappear. Her mother Anne expressed it with a simplicity that needed nothing added. The hardest thing about not knowing what he did with her is thinking that the child I gave life to, brought into this world and loved, has been thrown away as though she didn't matter. Jenny Nickel mattered. She has never been found. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone today. Thanks for watching Crime Chapter 51. If you enjoyed today's cases, let us know in the comments which one stayed with you the most, and tell us where you're watching from. If you love long-form true crime documentaries, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next case.